For most of us in especially New York and New Jersey, if I say the year 2001, it has particular resonance for us. I, of course, was actually in Manhattan in September the 11th, 2001. But what I didn't know, and as I discovered as I was reading Jonathan Sacks's most magnificent book, is that the year was actually began and was declared by the United Nations as the year of dialogue between civilizations. That was in January. 9 months later, it became instead the clash of civilizations, and it was the springboard for Rabbi Sacks to write his book. It was published in 2002, The Dignity of Difference, and it was his radical proposal for reconciling hatred and hatreds. And he realized that we must do more than just search for common values, especially within our faiths, because, of course, as you remember, part of what happened in September the 11th was there did become not just a clash of civilizations, but a clash between Islam and the rest of the world. And he said that it was more than just searching for the commonalities in these faiths, but rather that we must reframe the way we see our differences. Now, in preparing for today's service, I listened to a couple of his speeches, and to be very honest with you, if you think about it, it would be 20 plus years ago that he was delivering these speeches while he was talking about the publication of his book. And I thought to myself, my goodness, everything that he was saying then is not only relevant to now, but intensely so. He sadly died in 2020. And one of the things that I love that was said about him was, we lost a Torah luminary and an intellectual giant who had a transformative global impact. And what I would like to share just in these next few minutes, because I'm aware that we're running out of time this morning, and I would urge you, if you could, either to listen to some of his talks on YouTube, or even if you can, borrow a copy of his book from the local library. Some of you may even have it on your shelves. But I just want to touch on 2 or 3 things before we conclude today. And the first one is that the word dignity, as I was sharing with Terry this week, I love that that's what he called it, the dignity of difference. And dignity, if you look at it as a word in the dictionary, it's actually a word that is a two-way word. It's not something that you give, but also something that you have. And I rather like that. So, of course, dignity is, as we said earlier, it's an honoring, it's a giving of respect, but it's also, we're created innately to have a capacity for dignity for ourselves. And I almost would argue that you couldn't have one without the other. And as we touched on in my last service, that we are created to be different. You just have to look at the natural world around you to see that difference is everywhere. It was created to be, because it is the essence of life. And then all you need to do, those of you, I know we've got a lot of big travelers in our midst, especially Judy Manton. I think of you as a constant, perennial, intrepid explorer, world explorer. There are many of those amongst us. Look at the different cultures and races, the geography, the customs, and the languages. Did you know that in Queens, New York, the borough of Queens, more than 800 languages are spoken? That's how important our difference and our need to be different is. And for those who speak Hebrew, forgive me if I butcher this. I'm going to give it my best shot. I studied Hebrew at university, but I'm going to say one line from a common prayer, and then I'll translate it into English. Borei nefashot rabot vechesronan, which means, in English, it's a prayer to God, he who, and I quote, creates many kinds of souls and their deficiencies. Strange prayer, is it not? But if you actually think about it, we're created to be deficient. Why? Because we fill those deficiencies with each other and each other's wisdom and each other's being. And as I said in what I sent out this week to advertise today's service, it's this beautiful quote: if we deny difference, we lose something we need to know. And one of my dear friends here, she's a female rabbi. I'm hoping that you might get to meet her next service. Her name is Ondi. She comes originally from Hungary, but she lives here now with her husband, also a rabbi, in Cape Town. And she taught me something quite magnificent this week. The prayer shawl, the talit. When you're saying your morning prayers, you're supposed to wait until there's enough light that you're able to recognize the difference between the stripes. Isn't that profound? That you're not even supposed to pray until you have an understanding and the need to notice difference and the different sections between the blue and the white and the width of the stripes. I also loved what Rabbi Sachs said about the Jewish people. He said that, of course, they are one of the world's minorities, especially in a religious and traditional sense. And a reminder that whatever we want to call it, the God of our own understanding cares about the rights of minorities, and that the minorities are amongst us to teach us, because they're not always right, and they're not always wise, and they're not always have everything, but they're to teach us that they're there to make up the whole. And Jonathan also said, and I will quote him directly, the test of faith is whether I can make a difference, a space for difference. Can I recognize God's image in someone who is not my image, whose language, faith, ideals are different from mine? If I cannot, he said, then I have made God in my image. Instead of allowing him, he uses the male pronoun, I'm sorry, but let's just go with what he wrote. Then I have made God in my image instead of allowing him to make me in his. Isn't that beautiful? We have many differences in our world. And in one world, we're asked to coexist. And Jonathan's prayer was, may your work help all of us to cherish our commonalities and at the same time be enlarged by our differences. And I want to close with a couple more thoughts. The first one is this. And I thought this was very interesting, and I think it's something that all of us in this chaotic time that we find ourselves living, he asks us not to be in a place of reaction. He said fundamentalists will always have them with us. but to remember that without a moral vision, any fundamentalist organization or person or whatever will fail. It will fail because of that dynamic that we're meant to coexist. And that if we're to share our differences, the only way it can is to emerge from conversation. And it's what Terry was talking about earlier. Conversation, not just talking, but also deep listening to one another across boundaries of class, income, race, and faith. And my takeaway from his book really was that in this time, we're being asked to step out of our own confines of where we say that we want difference, but sometimes we shield ourselves in commonalities, to step outside of that and to have these conversations. It's the action, he said, and not the reaction. And it's the refusal to be defined by circumstance. And let me finish with this. There may be times, he said, when we feel that we are powerless to prevent injustice, but there must never be a time when we fail to protest. And in reading that, I thought of the time when I met the Archbishop Desmond Tutu in New York at the Bleecker Street Theater. Some of you may know it. They do a lot of off-Broadway stuff. I don't even know if they're still going, but I saw many remarkable, transformative, life-changing plays there. And I met Tutu there. And he said to a small gathering around us, this was during the Iraq War, and I was very politically motivated and feeling powerless and angry and felt that I was the only one who was seeing what I could see. And he said, and I want to speak to, I'm half American. I know my accent doesn't sound like it, but I want to speak to all of you and for this to land with you. He said, and of course he traveled all around the world trying to garner support against the apartheid regime, but also to bring understanding amongst the peoples of the world. And he said in all his travels, he had never met a more generous, giving, and supportive people than the Americans. And he looked each and every one of us in the eye and said, I want you to know that that's how we perceive you. And therefore, when you can, always, when you're fighting injustice, just say, not in my name, because that's not who I am and we are. And I thought if the Tutu, if the Arch Desmond Tutu can feel that, then so can I, and so can we. Thank you, everybody.
If you like this video, please like us on YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and click on the bell to be notified whenever we post a new video. Thank you.